Hello, my name is Dylan Behan, aka Interbeing Art, and today I'd like to talk to you about the themes and archetypes that overlay many of the experiences with Salvia Divinorum. Salvia Divinorum is a mint plant that grows near Mazatec, Mexico in a very localized and remote area. It was only discovered less than 100 years ago. Locals claim that their grandparents were the first to use Salvia Divinorum, which is very surprising. The local name for Salvia Divinorum was Scamari pastora, the eyes of Mary, the shepherdess. This is relating to the Virgin Mary. Of course, this is post-Spanish conquest. And it's really odd that they would assign the Virgin Mary as the name for this plant, because it's not like anything in the Bible. It's very spiritual, that's for sure, and feminine. Shamans claim that Scamari pastora is timid like a deer, and it does not like being burned. Shamans in southern Mexico use this plant by rolling up the leaves and squeezing it between their jaw and leaving that there for about 20 minutes, whereas up here we get the extracts, where they take the most powerful chemical of the plethora of chemicals in salvia, and they'll take salvinorin A and times that by 20, the amount you would usually get on a leaf. However, there are salvinorin B, C, D, E. Salvia divinorum is a very atypical hallucinogen for a few reasons. The main one being is that it's not an alkaloid. That is why it stayed legal for a while. Most psychedelics are alkaloids, so they could be, labeled as such. Most psychedelic alkaloids work through the serotonin receptors, whereas salvinorin A is an antagonist to the K-opioid receptor. The objective effects of salvia include, but are not limited to, time distortion. Time loses meaning often for a lot of people. Altered body ownership, which is sort of frightening.
I didn't even know if this was me anymore.
A lot of people feel like they are possessed or not themselves anymore under the influence. Altered sense of reality may be an obvious one, but worth noting. Another objective effect is synesthesia. With other psychedelics, people claim to see sound or taste sound. Salvia is also unique in this category because the type of synesthesia you get, you feel what you see. Where, for example, if I were to see this singing bowl, I would not just be seeing it, I would actually feel it as if it was like pressed up against my face. And that can often be uncomfortable, where something just like a light would feel like a prickly thorn bush or something. One of the most important objective effects that everybody should know before doing salvia is that it is dysphoric. Often salvia is very uncomfortable and unpleasant. That's not to say that you can't get euphoric epiphanies or feel euphoric on it, but it's much more rare when it comes to salvia. Alright, now for the main event, the archetypes. Many people have experienced similar themes. I have read many trip reports and had a few experiences myself where many of the themes and hallucinations were very similar, if not identical, to other people's. It's my personal belief that symbolism is the language of unconscious nature, that in our dreams and oftentimes in waking life, things will be communicated to us through symbolism. It is a more primal language. So by analyzing these symbols, archetypes, and themes, hopefully we can get a clearer image about what Salvia might be trying to tell us. Alright, time for the archetypes. I'm going to start off this list with flying. Flying is a common experience with Salvia, but how flying is experienced is very unique.
And as soon as I laid down, this is where it gets weird, my mind shoots out of my body and I'm above the trailer about 100 feet looking down on the trailer.
Then I shot out of my roof and about 100 yards above my house.
I've read many times that people have felt like they shot up through their roof and then were suspended in air and were able to see their surrounding area, geographical region, or being taken onto a train. What I've noticed is that whenever people talk about the cannon, the train, or flying, it's often right at the beginning of the trip, which expresses to me that Salvia is just demonstrating its power. It's kind of like when you just get a boost of testosterone or something like that, or a boost of energy, and you're just like, wow, and you can almost just like fly out of your seat. Often in dreams, flying represents freedom and liberty. However, I think in the case of Salvia, I think it's more of a display of power, and also to give you the perspective of, if you can see over your landscape and surrounding area, it just gives you that perspective. Next on my list is the steamroller. I've heard many people comment on a steamroller, but it takes other forms too, where people say their neighborhood was being rolled up like a carpet, or just like the sensation of everything being flattened and just rolling up, almost like rolling up a curtain.
Rolling across the earth, sucking up, crushing everything under it and sucking everything up under it like a steamroller from the Looney Tunes cartoons.
My whole neighborhood was being rolled up like a carpet.
Along with the steamroller is the sensations of being taken away, depleted, and it's a very strong force. Forcibly passes through any opposition. It's just another demonstration of power and force. Zippers is another theme, often called zipper heads. I've heard two different perspectives of this, where they see people walking through reality, but their heads are like zippers and nothingness is following behind them, where they're basically unzipping reality. And then I've heard it on the other side, where they're in the void, so to speak, and they're just like, there's these heads of people flying through it.
Like heads of people traveling through the darkness like a zipper, pulling their reality behind them.
What zippers represent to me is the rupture of plane. The term rupture of plane was coined by Lloyd. It prefigures the passage from one mode of being into another. The archaic idea is that state cannot be changed without being annihilated. Hence this overwhelming, sinister feeling that reality is being crushed and that force. This also deals with the obliteration of time and order. Upon looking into zippers, I found it very interesting that the zipper was first demonstrated by the inventor through circuses. And I find that really interesting because this goes into my next archetype of the circus. The circus is a motif with many psychedelics, especially DMT. The circus has a lot of motifs and aspects to it. I've heard people wandering through circus tents. I've heard people saying that it's just like carnival-like. I've heard people being taken as a sideshow to circuses, or being the sideshow. Some of the themes of the circus is this instinctive nature, which correlates to the spontaneous, very fast-acting hallucinogenic force. There's a lot of passion in there. It appeals to the creative side of our nature. It represents chaos, cheer, entertainment, and also takes you away from the world you used to for excitement and novelty and a lot of fun. But as you know, there's circuses can be very scary. The circus motif is very deep, and I'd like to talk about this some other time. Similar to the circus, another archetype is the parade.
The group was marching, almost dancing in a way.
I've had the experience of being swept into the Salvia parade with all the beings, and many other people have. There's this rhythmic beating and chanting, and you're just like in this line marching towards something. The parade represents repetition, rhythm, it represents celebration, being a part of something bigger. Also in parades is a sense of pride and humor, kind of showing off your feathers, what you can do. Along with the parade, chanting often occurs in these breakthrough experiences, and that goes along with the rhythm.
It sounded like hundreds, if not thousands, of voices reciting this chant in unison.
And it's this expression of many voices in harmony, implying one-mindedness. And who is chanting? It is the entire landscape, because it's all made up of all these little beings.
I felt that I was looking at the inside of my body, as if it were a shell, and inside were all of these two-dimensional people dancing.
Terence McKenna called them fractal adumbrations of the self. That's kind of a bigger term. I like to call them interbeings. This is my theory. I think of them as spirit cells, where our body is made up of all these one-celled organisms. Hypothetically, our psyche could be too. And if our psyche was composed of all these tiny little beings, each one would represent a different characteristic of yourself. In terms of Salvia, many experiences with these beings, aside from the parade, is the archetype of the factory or warehouse, where people go to this factory and see that these beings are actually creating reality. And it's strange to be like, whoa, reality is actually being made in a factory? This is just a mask, another symbolism, because the factory represents a place of creation, understanding how it's made. It's very introspective of whys and hows. It provides insights of inner workings. There's also this underlying theme of exploitation. I mean, I've worked warehouses, so I can vouch for that. You just feel like you're being exploited, and many people who have taken Salvia feel like, this is a joke or something like that that's being played on them. Interestingly, the factory ties into this sensation of moving, because Salvia often has sensations of pulling or spinning or pushing, like you feel this force on you. And oftentimes when I've read people experiencing the factory, they're either on a conveyor belt and they're moving that way, or they're in this big vat that's spinning. And these spinning vats also leads to another archetype, which is the flip book, or the book of life.
I was told from a female voice I could not place that this was the place between moments.
There's actually many people talking about this. The book of life definitely deserves a video on its own, because it is basically a theory of reality itself. To put it simply, it represents the breaking down of time into moments or slices. Salvia argues that time isn't a continuous stream and flowing of time, unbroken. The book of life, this flip book, shows us that in the indetectable levels of time, that there's a space between each frame, and in between the spaces of moments, reality is being made. There's a sense that we are moving forward through frames, or the frames are in motion by some otherworldly force. And oftentimes when people see the book of life, not only do they see the moments just before they smoke salvia and moments in their future, presumably, they also can see childhood memories on these pages that they've forgotten about up until that point. And the childhood theme is definitely prominent in the breakthrough psychedelic experience. These breakthrough experiences not only makes you feel like a child just because you have to relearn what you're looking at. When we grow up through life, we feel like we got a hold on reality, at least to some extent. But the breakthrough psychedelic experience takes us back to the foundation of learning and the fundamental rules. learning shapes, colors, sounds, sensations, and our personality, etc. Man, Salvia just brings you right back there, like you feel like a baby again. Early memories are still there, just unable to access them in our regular mode of consciousness. Here's another biggie that ties into the circus, childhood, and parades, and that is the archetype of the jester. And by jester, I also mean clown and other kind of silly, mocking characters. They have a big role in the breakthrough psychedelic experience, and they're a very spiritual archetype. The destroyer of unwanted rubbish, principles, and ideas. The way the jester destroys unwanted principles and ideas is by acting as both a mirror and a teacher. By mocking us, it forces us to laugh and be introspective, to face our own fears and doubts, hatreds and weaknesses. Also, laughter, we've all heard, is the best medicine. Jesters assist us in healing via removing bad processes. They're very challenging. Jesters also let you in on the joke. And then there's this quote, you laugh as your belief systems crumble. Humor is essential for a person to question and destroy while protecting themselves from antagonism from which they are questioning. Satire presents important questions and say what others are scared to say. Heyokas were jesters of North American Aboriginal nations, and they were said to have the power to heal pain in others and release tension. They also dissolve the ego by making a mockery of it. They never follow the rules, norms, or boundaries. They act like children. And their core question is, why? Boom. Becoming inanimate objects is something people report often, and it represents the merging of consciousness. If you were on a couch, you would kind of like sink into it and become the couch. And it connects us to the spirit that moves through all things, as System of a Down says in their song Science. This represents putting yourself in other people's shoes, and in this case, people are inanimate objects. This is a very humorous way of Salvia trying to break our ego. People often see vines on Salvia. In my first Salvia experience, I looked up and saw these vines coming down and like grabbing me, the core essence of me, and it was about to like pull me out of my body. These ropey colored vines, but also people see them as being like interlaid on top of each other and making up other things where people are like made up of vines and stuff like that. Vines often represent constriction, which is something people experience in Salvia a lot, this overwhelming sense of claustrophobia. But it also represents the reclamation of nature. An archetype opposite to vines and the organic nature of Salvia is the archetype of concrete and cement. People feel like they're being paved or being stuck in concrete. What concrete and cement represents is a feeling of being flattened, being taken over. What concrete and cement does, it binds and it makes reality solid and definite. Cement is also very sturdy and taken for granted, and this type of symbolism to me is a reflection of the feeling that Salvia gives us. For example, if we feel like we can't move or things are very concrete, then the visual image of that naturally would be concrete or cement. Wow, I'm just zipping through this. And completing my list of archetypes for today is the grandest of all archetypes when it comes to Salvia, and that is the shepherdess. I mean, Salvia is actually named the shepherdess, the eyes of the shepherdess. It reminds me of the nursery rhyme, Little Bo Peep. Little Bo Peep has lost her sheep, and she doesn't know where to find them. Leave them alone and they'll come home, wagging their tails behind them. What the shepherdess does is it nurtures and guides in a direction, and it watches over the herd. I mean, certainly with the parade, and all these little interbeings that I talked about before. The shepherdess often appears as this omnipresent voice, and all these interbeings are moving toward this shepherdess or following it. Rarely do people get to witness or see who the shepherdess is. A fellow YouTuber named the Salvia Shaman has a video called Nursery Rhymes, and in that report they had an experience very similar to mine where they were in a line paraded with all these beings and marching. However, I panicked and just got the hell out of there, and the Salvia Shaman saw through a peephole little Bo Peep. What do you know? And the odd thing about this woman who was in a bonnet, this person had a caterpillar body, which is baffling. But let's just look at this for a second. The Salvia Shaman saw through a peephole little Bo Peep hurting these creatures. So who is this shepherdess and what does she want? I mean, if she is really scared and timid like a deer, that would explain why people feel such dysphoria and lack of message. It almost seems like Salvia doesn't want to be experienced by most people. I feel like that's why Salvia gives people such a hard time, is because most people don't respect it or don't know what it is. The shepherdess just basically says, fuck you, I don't want anything to do with you. So she just makes sure that they don't burn her again. It's really interesting if you watch my Salvia trip report, The Parade of the Shepherdess, and also watch Nursery Rhymes by Salvia Shaman. You'll see the correlation between our two trips. For all the reductionist critics who think that this is just all a product of your imagination, if the hallucinations of Salvia truly were just our imagination, then why are there so many common themes between its users? If you were to take a large number of these trip reports and analyze them, one would have to come to the conclusion that there is an archetypal world that we're entering into. Whether or not it's truth or another reality, my theory is that the spirit of Salvia is actually merging with her consciousness when we take it. This real rapid interaction and communication between the user and the Salvia spirit. I often wonder if Salvia really has a motive, or if it's just as scared as we are. And so, to wrap up this video, I have to admit I don't have any conclusions with this list. We can see how a lot of these archetypes are laid over each other, such as the Circus, Jester, Childhood. What I hope to demonstrate with this video is what a lot of other users on Arrowid and Reddit, Shroomery, DMT Nexus, etc. have all been agreeing on too, that there are too many similarities between trips for this to be a coincidence. And I really hope that users who didn't expect the experience to be as intense or reality shattering as it was, I really hope people watching this find solace that you are not alone when experiencing these really weird and messed up realities. It's actually normal. So I really hope you liked this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. Subscribe for future content. I'm a visionary artist, so I like to paint hallucinogenic breakthrough experiences. So if you have any experience you want to describe to me, I would like to paint it eventually. Thank you all very much. Please take care. Be careful when using this substance. Take care.
I've read that salvia is used as an antidepressant. I couldn't agree more. All my petty worries were gone, and I loved life for what it was, knowing at any second it could all be ripped away from me.